Canada's social credit score and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials. And the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins, our producer. And we have with us a special guest, Lauren Arakan from the state of Maryland. Welcome, Lauren.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here finally.
Yes, and don't take her niceness for granted because she's tough, let me just say. So get ready for this podcast, listeners. It's going to be quite a ride. This podcast is called Canada's Social Credit Score. Folks, we've talked about this. In fact, we talked about this over a year and a half ago in China, how they create a social credit score when you actually criticize the government. The state starts to crack down on what you can and can't do. They crack down on whether you can rent a nicer apartment or buy a house or apartment. They crack down on what kind of food you can buy. That's no lie in China. They crack down on every aspect of your life, including whether you can go to a better school, whether you can go to the university, all these things. It's come to the West.
Scary.
It has come to Canada, Lauren.
I'm so disturbed.
If you know David Sachs is one of the original founders of PayPal, and he is not on the far left tech reservation, not even close. So David Sachs just wrote an article on Substack, because of course no one else is going to publish it or allow it to go out there. And he writes, a social credit system arrives in Canada. Justin Trudeau has just created a caste of economic untouchables. Can we stop this dystopian policy from taking hold in America? I'm just going to read a little bit of this because this guy Sachs, ladies and gentlemen, is a whiz with technology. I mean, he has started many different companies. He's very well off. He's very financially successful, obviously, but he also is right of center and he's a critical thinker. So he writes this. Last summer, I warned readers of common sense that financial deplatforming would be the next wave of online censorship. Big tech companies like PayPal were already working with left-wing groups like the ADL and the SPLC to define lists of individuals and groups who should be denied service. Keep in mind, this is the guy who is one of the founders of PayPal and, of course, is long since exited, but is criticizing the old company because it's been taken over by crazy people. As more and more similarly minded tech companies followed suit, as happened with social media censorship, these deplorables would be deplatformed, debunked, and eventually denied access to the modern economy altogether as punishment for their unacceptable views. This prediction has now become a reality. What I could not have anticipated is that it would occur first in our mild-mannered neighbor to the north, with the Canadian government itself directing the reprisals. It remains to be seen whether Canada will be a bellwether for the U.S. But anyone who cares about the future of America as a place where citizens are free to protest their government needs to understand what has just occurred and work to stop it from taking root here. Lauren.
I know. This makes my skin crawl. And you know what the next step is? The next step is going to be they're going to move us over to some kind of fully digital currency. And then they're just going to turn off our chip. That's what I'm hearing. That's where it's going. I'm afraid to invest in any crypto now because I'm like, which one's going to be the chosen one? And when are they just going to shut it off for us? I mean, they were taking people out of trucks at gunpoint. That's really disturbing. It's gone from them gaslighting us for years and telling us we're imagining fascism is coming and them calling conservatives fascists to them going full frontal with their fascism. It's pretty disturbing.
I've never heard that before. Full frontal fascism. So here's the thing, though, is, and I agree with you on the digital currency thing. We've kind of talked about this before, but I'm going to cover this more. And that is, we are constantly told by millennials, you know what you need to do? You need to put your money in crypto because the government can't touch the crypto. And here's the thing. The second that you convert your paper dollars to crypto, which is this electronic blockchain, how do you ever get it back if the government seizes it or if you lose it? And I know millennials forever will say, oh, it'll never happen. Well, guess what? It happened. It happened in Canada.
Yeah, it happened. Yeah, it'll happen. Trust me. And they'll pick one. Everybody tells me the new cool crypto to buy all the time. I'm always getting emails and texts from my girlfriends. This is what the crypto is I'm buying. I'm like, if it's not the chosen crypto, honey, it's going to be gone. And it's going to be in one day. It's going to be gone in a snap. And then what do you have? I hope you have gold or copper or steel or some kind of tangible, because you're going to be hungry.
It's funny. I had this conversation, I should say, with my son about this. And he's like, well, the thing is to not have a platform hold your crypto. You need to hold your crypto directly. So don't have Coinbase hold your crypto. Have your crypto personally in your own personal wallet, and all of the information to be able to access it. I'm sorry, but for me personally, I'd rather have a bunch of gold, silver, $100 bills, diamonds, and all that stuff inside of my safe where I can actually touch it and have it in my possession than I would do these other things. By the way, that even includes putting money in the bank at this point.
Yeah, we keep not very much of our money in a bank right now. We keep it in a lot of hard assets. That's, and we buy real estate because real estate's hard to steal.
Yeah, they can. Well, it's hard to take it. Yeah. They could try to take it.
They will.
But the first thing, I agree, Lauren, the first thing they're going to do in the US, but the first thing they did in China, but also, of course, Canada now, because it's come to the West, is they're going to go after your bank account and freeze it in some way.
Yep.
And I don't know if anyone out there in podcast land has ever owned a business, borrowed money for your business, and gotten to the point where you were in an economic distress situation. I've been there, by the way. And this was many years ago. I was involved in an economic distress situation with my business. And because it was a commercial loan, the bank can, guess what? Freeze your accounts.
Yep.
So you borrow money commercially, let's say, to buy a small business. The bank says, yes, I will loan you the money for the small business, but here's what I want in return. I want you to sign a personal guarantee, and I want all of your bank accounts at this bank.
Yep.
And then if things start going south with the business, what does the bank do? They freeze your accounts.
That's right.
Now, if you've ever had your accounts frozen, and I have, you know what? You can't buy food. You can't buy gasoline. You can now not make your car payment. So that will be repossessed as well. The governments know this.
Yeah.
And China, of course, already does this. And now we have Canada that's doing this. So they're trying to get people to behave, if you will, which is what a social credit score is. Behave, or else we're going to do this.
That's right. Yeah. They're going to stop people from traveling. I mean, the next step for Canada is preventing their citizens from leaving their borders. The border security is going to be on the other side now, because if people try to get out as refugees from this, financial abuse of their government, they're going to run to America, where we still have a little bit of freedom, and we'll welcome you. Come on down.
So, podcast listeners, when was the last time you heard anyone from the West say this? This is Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Here's what he said. We're not going to play the clips yet. I just want to read this. He said that the truckers and their supporters had, quote, unacceptable views.
Unbelievable.
That's what comes from like a Chinese, Communist Party official like Xi, or from Putin, or from, the Venezuelan dictator or the Cuban dictator. I mean, that's what they would say, right? These are unacceptable views. You cannot have these views. And so therefore, we're going to sway you from having these views. How is this possible in the West? And look, I want your opinion, because obviously, are you a millennial, by the way?
I am.
That's what I thought. So
yeah, you're Mark and the two millennials today.
Yes, it's Mark and the two millennials. So Lauren, who is a millennial, of course, is going to talk to us about whether she believes, as someone who is a conservative, whether or not this could ever happen here. And here's the thing. I've been told this many times by my wife, you just trust the system too much. You just think this couldn't happen here. And I've always, of course, been a very skeptical person anyway of government. However, now that this is here in the West, in Canada, our neighbor, what's to stop it from spreading?
Oh, it's coming. I'm with your wife. I believe that this is us. We're next. I mean, if you already see what happen with our own trucker convoy that's starting over in California, let's just wait a week or two and see how that goes. I guarantee you we'll see the same deplatforming. We'll see the GoFundMes and the fundraising sites get enormous pressure from the government to shut down the funding. I think they'll try to keep the funds. Last time they tried to keep them with the Canadian truckers, they apparently had to return the funds after an uproar. I don't know if we'll see that. I mean, they already control almost all media sources. So they can spin this story however they want to. And I would be shocked if something like this didn't happen in America at this point, because people are still asleep. I mean, they're just like, oh, I'm happy to take off my mask today. Like they don't even thinking like 2 steps ahead where we're going. I mean, we are, but other people don't seem to be. Certainly the left isn't.
So here's David Sachs continuing in this article. On Monday, he said, which was last Monday of last week, the rhetoric turned into action when Trudeau invoked the Emergencies Act in Canada. This heretofore unused 1988 law gives the government virtually unlimited power for 30 days to deal with a crisis. Invoking the law under the present circumstance would require the threat or use of serious violence. Yet, the vast majority of protesters have not been using violence. They've been peaceful. We are the world. In fact, they've been playing, we are the world. We are the, how's that song go?
Oh, I don't even know. I'm a millennial.
Okay. And waving maple leaf flags. So they're like very peaceful. Indeed, the government has made little attempt to justify the need for emergency powers beyond Trudeau's frequently bemoaning of the truckers' alleged hateful rhetoric. So it just goes on in talking about that. But Trudeau, nonetheless, has decided to do what? To look into loans, credit unions, cryptocurrency wallets, etc. And he continues on, David Sachs, and says, well, the war on terror here in the United States, well, we gave the government the right to do all of those things too.
Yeah, already.
They already have this right.
I know it. Guantanamo, here we come.
Under the guise of, you are a threat to the regime. Yep. So therefore, we can look into all of your personal business and freeze your assets.
Oh, yeah. This started a long time ago in America. I mean, truly, it started after the Oklahoma City bombing as sort of the first inklings. But after 9/11, we gave up almost all of our rights in America. And there was a few loud people talking about it, but it pretty much was just ignored. And so, the framework is in place for them to just take whatever they want, and they can hold us without charging us now. As long as they label it as domestic terrorism, they can hold us in Guantanamo for as long as they want to.
And this is what's interesting, right? Because I want to know what millennials are willing to do. Like, how far will millennials go to try to protect their freedoms? Millennials are very clever, I know, because they're like, oh, well, we'll just figure out some technical way to go around it like crypto. But obviously, I have my doubts about that. What else do they plan on doing?
They got to get their hands dirty if they want to save their country. I mean, you're not going to text message your way, tweet your way out of a full-scale financial assault on dissidents. You have to get off your butt, get your signs, go down, block traffic, be a pain. You have to call every day. I mean, I've done advocacy before I was a politician, and holy crap, you have to not be lazy. I mean, call, email, go down there physically, make appointments. Don't stop there, and don't stop till you get what you want. That's how you win. So I hope that they wake up. Some of them are. But.
So mainly what you're saying is a lot of millennials just aren't paying attention. It's not something that they think is possible because they're so busy just trying to get ahead. And as you said, just trying to go a day without having to wear the mask in the workplace, that they're just happy about that. So they're not focused on these things.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we have to wake them up because they're what we've got. And Gen Z is not going to help. So they're worse than we are. So it's our jam. We have to do it. Otherwise, we're going to be, trading beans for Brussels sprouts. And I don't even like Brussels sprouts. So.
Yeah, I'm not that crazy about them either, but that's like a big thing now. Would you like the Brussels sprouts with the blue cheese and they've been grilled and all that stuff? No, not too good.
Burnt, you mean?
Yeah,
Gross.
It's not very good. Exactly.
No.
And it smells awful. It's like BO coming out of the kitchen and you're like, and I got to eat this. So
yeah, it's gross.
Prime Minister Trudeau called the opposition swastika waving in Parliament. Okay. So obviously Canada is a parliamentary system. There's a unique debate style that occurs where the prime minister defends his government against the opposition, which is plural, because obviously it's a parliamentary system. So you don't really have two parties. You have a multi-party system. And we have him speaking on the floor. We have a series of clips, podcast listeners. We're going to talk about these to give you an idea of how scary things have gotten in Canada as a warning as to what is sort of, in many ways, already happening here in the United States. Here's the first clip.
Mr. Speaker, Conservative Party members can stand with people who wave swastikas. They can stand with people who wave the Confederate flag. We will choose to stand with Canadians who deserve to be able to get to their jobs, who be able to get their lives back. These illegal protests need to stop, and they will, Mr. Speaker.
Illegal protests, right? I mean, think about that. It's a protest, and he's calling the protest illegal in a free society, and that they are swastika waving. Now, of course, folks, I'm the first to say that if anyone has a swastika, of course, that shouldn't happen, right? Nonetheless, in a free society, you get to protest. And you get to carry the American flag, the Canadian flag. You can carry the flag of the CCP if you want to in the protest, right? It just needs to be peaceful. So he's basically saying that because it's a protest and there is a single person with tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people, there's a single person or single 3 or 4 people that are waving a swastika, which I've yet to see that picture because I keep looking for it. But let's just say it happened. That therefore he can freeze their bank accounts.
It wouldn't shock me if we find out that the picture comes up and the gentlemen have really clean cut hair and have federal badges. Just,
right.
Just throwing that out there.
Oh, like that dude in Capitol Hill on January 6th, right? It was like clearly a Fed.
Oh my gosh.
And he's saying, we need to break inside the Capitol. And he's got the, Trump, what was it? Make America Great Again, Trump hat. Break inside this way. Yeah, come. This way. Yeah,
we've already opened this door right here.
Exactly. It's this door is open. Not that one. This one is open.
I don't want to break any glass. I don't want to have to take unemployment for a little while.
And all these other people who broke into the Capitol who encouraged people to do so are in jail. They're in prison, awaiting trial, which amazing that they're in prison awaiting trial for over a year.
Yeah.
Now, here's a guy, they know where he is, and they haven't arrested him or they haven't charged him. They haven't interviewed him. They don't know who he is.
Yeah.
And it's just like this in Canada.
Oh, yeah. This is the same thing that happened with the Governor Whitmore abduction. When I finally read the court documents, there was a ton of names that were blacked out. And there was like only 6 guys. I think there was at least 3 of them that were on the payroll.
This is Governor Half Whitmer of Michigan, right?
That's the one. I was like, wait a minute, this was like a Fed operation. And they just suckered some schmucks into going along with it. Come on, guys, do better. You can do better.
Exactly.
It's embarrassing.
It is embarrassing. It really makes you wonder what is happening to these governments because the deep state is now deciding that they are willing to do anything to be able to protect the status quo.
Absolutely.
And the whole purpose of protests is to upset the status quo.
Of course. That's what we're supposed to do that, especially in America.
Peaceful protests, by the way. So,
Don't burn down police buildings, okay?
Yeah, don't do that.
It's not a good look.
Don't burn down police buildings, but BLM, of course, they can do that all day long.
They can do that, okay? Yeah. The left gets a free pass.
Yeah, they get a free pass, which, interestingly enough, on the floor of Parliament in Canada, there was even an opposition leader who was discussing that. We'll get to that. But here's the next clip. Here's the speaker in Parliament trying to bring order and then introducing the member from Thornhill who goes after Trudeau. We have that clip, and here it is.
I just want to remind the honourable members, including the Right Honourable Prime Minister, to use words that are not inflammatory in the House, and that's for both sides. The honourable member for Thornhill.
Unbecoming as a Prime Minister. It's been 48 hours that the government went from doing nothing to a national emergency. 48 hours into using the measures. 48 hours without providing Parliament with a justification. So my question is simple. When will the Prime Minister admit that he's lost control of the situation, that he's lost control of his country, that he's lost control of his caucus, and that he's lost control of his leadership?
So that was awesome, right? And so this young lady was really upset because she's actually Jewish and she's part of the opposition. And Trudeau, of course, says she's swastika waving, which is just so stupid. But there's also the other observation, too, which is imagine if this happened in like the Maryland House of Delegates, since you are a member of the Maryland House of Delegates, and then you got to like yell at each other during the.
Oh, I would love that. Honey, we would have so much fun, Mark. Let me tell you. Oh, I would enjoy every second of
Every
that.
time somebody got up from the other side, it's like, oh my God, here she goes again.
Yeah.
That's right. Boom.
They already audibly groan when either of us stand up.
They do.
Yeah.
That's true.
Yeah.
So the Prime Minister of Canada had a response to that young lady whom he called swastika waving because she dared to speak out for the protesters, even though she's Jewish. Here is his response. We have that clip, and here it is.
Question of caucus and support for these blockades, the Conservative politicians need to make a choice. Are they for the blockades or are they for communities, our economy, and regular Canadians? The member from Provencher pointed out about the emergency blockade, the illegal blockades. He has never seen such a patriotic display in Canada. There's nothing patriotic about hurting fellow Canadians. The member from Grand Prairie Mackenzie claims that the economy is not being held hostage. All the while, hundreds of millions of dollars were being lost in trade due to blockades. And the member from Sarnia-Lambton doesn't believe her constituents need guaranteed access now to the Blue Water Bridge. Mr. Speaker, we stand with Canadians.
Yeah, we stand with Canadians. We don't stand with the truckers because they're not Canadians anymore. And they're really affecting our economy. Ice fishing is at an all-time low.
They're just using this as an excuse for the actual trade problems that we're having. They're like, quick, cover this up. Ships are sitting on the docks with, an inability to unload. Let's blame it on truckers.
So Prime Minister Trudeau, so he says this, he's up there talking about this, and he says, what do you call them? Regular Canadians.
Right.
Regular Canadians.
Yep. They dehumanize them.
So that's so good. So let's talk about that.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like the Hillary Clinton deplorable comment.
Absolutely.
So over here, you have the status quo, you have the normal people, and then over here, you have the deplorables.
This is what fascism is. This is what it always does.
So it's almost like it's kind of like that passport, right? The COVID passport.
Yeah.
You're not normal because you don't have a passport.
Right.
And you're like, well, look, I truly am following the science because I had COVID, the original COVID, and I still have the COVID antibodies, and I've gotten tested, and I've done everything I'm supposed to do. So follow the science. It's like, no, you're not doing the right thing because you're just not. You don't have we're not going to give you a passport. You can't travel. It can't work.
Yeah, they don't want you to follow the science. They want you to obey. It's not about science. It's about obedience, subservience. Yeah, it's gross. And every country who has had any type of genocide starts with dehumanization of the opposition. This is what they do. They make you less than. And that's what's been happening in America towards conservatives for a long time. I mean, you'll see a lot of articles in New York Times about how there's higher COVID deaths in counties where they voted for Trump. Because there's a lot of older people that voted for Trump. But they don't say that. It's like the most obvious, older people are more likely to die of COVID. But that's what and it's just repeated to dehumanize us.
Yes, exactly. It's because they're trying to make a connection between the fact that you voted for someone and the high death rate, which of course there's no connection whatsoever. There are so many other factors that are involved.
Of course.
But meanwhile, here's the social credit score in the United States. There were cities like New York who said, we're going to prioritize the COVID vaccine to people who are Black and brown.
Yeah.
Well, that's a social credit score. I mean, it's critical race theory for healthcare.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is Obamacare, of course, which is why I don't like it. But all of this is happening in the United States. And so we're looking at Canada. Many millennials are. And by we, I mean you, because you're a millennial. And so it's Christopher Hopkins on their side of the camera. Woo. We're looking at Canada going, it's not happening here yet. It actually kind of sort of is.
It really is. And it really kind of started here before it was just Canada took our idea and just really went gangbusters with it. But I can't take my children into eat at a restaurant in DC or New York City. They can't go into the Smithsonian unless I show their papers. I'm not putting my kids' medical information on my cell phone. What kind of lunatic would do that?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Papers, please, papers.
Yeah.
So to prove this point, podcast listeners, that Canada is adopting a social credit score, listen to this gentleman in Parliament arguing during the same conversation with Prime Minister Trudeau. This gentleman talking about why we aren't applying the same law equally across Canada. We have that clip, and here it is.
The honourable member for Regina Capel.
Mr. Speaker, in 2020, when anti-energy protesters were blocking vital transportation, ships were backed up in ports and trains were stopped. The Prime Minister didn't stop them. In fact, he actually sent a government delegation to meet with them. But now that the protests are about something that he disagrees with, he uses inflammatory language, hurls personal attacks, and makes a massive power grab. We know the PM finds democracy inconvenient and that he admires China's dictatorship. So will the Prime Minister admit that this is all just a move to crack down on dissent?
There you go. So you had the anti-energy, the anti-oil, anti-natural gas energy people, the greenies, the climate change religious zealots in Canada who were blocking ports in Canada to make sure that Canadian petroleum and Canadian natural gas could not be exported. Okay. So these individuals were literally stopping the economy in Canada. And what did Trudeau do? Nothing. Did he freeze their bank accounts? He met with them. Yes.
Unbelievable. And that's all the truckers ever asked.
So here we have a social credit score.
Absolutely.
Here's an example.
Yeah.
You guys over here, you are not regular. You are deplorable. So therefore, we're going to freeze your accounts. We're going to arrest you. We're going to stop you from being able to work. These folks over here, you're cool. We like you. You're going to continue to vote for us. So therefore, we're going to just have a conversation with you.
Yeah, that's scary stuff. I mean, Trudeau is a communist, I think. I mean, he is. He's spoken publicly about his love for China. He's extolled the virtues of a dictatorship, how effective it can be. I mean, it's a disgusting situation. So, yeah, I'm scared for my Canadian friends. I'm not sure they knew what was coming. We've talked about this kind of stuff since 1984. The book, not the year. And they were kind of just floating along watching hockey or something. And now they're like, wait a second, I'm losing my country overnight.
So let me ask you something. As a millennial, if a leader, any elected official, from the lowest level in a county all the way to the president of the United States said, be careful what you say, how would you respond?
So I'm a strange millennial, I think, and I don't like authority. So I would respond by saying all the things I was just told not to say. But I think many millennials are afraid. I mean, they're a post 9/11 world. Like 9/11 happened when I was in high school, early in high school. And so we've seen kind of how the government has all this power, and we know we don't have as much power. I mean, I think my parents' generation are like, oh no, you can just complain and things get fixed. But my generation doesn't know if that's true or not. And I'm not sure, we all have mortgages, some of us multiple mortgages now, tons of kids, expenses. And how can families like that really fight back against a government we're not sure if we can trust?
Your generation doesn't trust the institutions of power anymore. And therefore, you kind of want to be, self-reliant? Is that what it is?
Yeah. I mean, that's at least in my friend group, the conservatives that I'm friends with, and even some liberals. Mark, I have a lot of recovering liberals as friends. And they were liberal when I met them.
What's a recovering liberal?
So a recovering liberal is like someone who voted for Bernie Sanders and then realized socialism was a bad idea at some point. And now they are big Trump supporters and they want to grow their own food and slaughter their own chickens. And I happily invite them to my house to watch me do it.
So you actually slaughter chickens yourself?
I hand butcher, baby.
Oh my God. Well, it's okay. So
can't you see me doing that?
I actually
you
can.
Totally can.
Yes, yeah. Yes. And you probably call out like this one, I'm going to call Biden. Biden.
That's for my shooting practice.
So you heard the opposition get up on the floor of Parliament talking about you didn't freeze the bank accounts of the protesters who were anti-energy. Well, here's Prime Minister Trudeau's response. He says, listen carefully. He says, be careful what you say. That's why I asked that question. We have that clip, and here it is.
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would advise the honourable member to be careful in that line of questioning before people actually look into what he and his fellow Conservative Party members said.
Dictator.
I want to remind the honourable members that shouting names at each other is not the way this place works. No. Before you start clapping, start looking at your own benches.
I actually thought that's the way Parliament was supposed to work. You're supposed to, exactly.
I thought that was the rule.
You're supposed to yell at each other and talk to each other and have this really vigorous debate. But here's the thing. You got him saying, be careful what you say. He may have said it in a different way. And then the other guy goes, dictator.
Yeah.
And of course, the speaker gets up. Well, come on. You all have to really get along and so forth. It's like, wait a minute. The guy in charge of the country told us we can't talk.
Or have our money. Like, he's freezing our bank accounts. But here, let me show him his due respect. It's like...
That's right. Can I kiss the ring, please?
Yeah, exactly. Can I have a piece of bread, sir? I mean...
Please, sir, can I have some more?
Yeah. Well, he's eating cake. I mean, this is like... And the French... They usually have a really strong streak. I was really hoping the French Canadians would really put their foot down, because when stuff happens in France, I've seen farmers dump manure into their parliamentary building from tractors. That's the kind of shit I want to see.
Yeah, but with Trudeau, it's more like he's going to dump croissants. That's what he wants to see.
Bring him to my house, Trudeau.
No manure, no truckers, must be croissants only. So next up, podcast listeners, Biden-Harris are underwater in California. You won't believe this. In the Daily Caller, Biden and Harris underwater with California voters, according to a new poll. That's unthinkable. President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris are underwater in the traditional blue state stronghold of California, according to a new poll released Wednesday. Biden's approval rating stands at 47%, a 12-point decline from August, a 2021 poll, and a 15-point decline from an April poll. According to the Berkeley IGS poll, which I'm sure is very skewed anyway. Meanwhile, his disapproval rating stands at 48%. So he is underwater. And in politics, that means that the individuals in the state are not going to vote for you at that particular snapshot in time. This is California.
This is amazing.
How's that possible?
We know their policies are horrible, and the people, the middle of the ground people, are waking up. I got an email from a woman last week who said, look, I'm a Democrat. I'm in your district. I've done everything right. Delegate, I've done everything right. I've masked my children for 2 years. I got the vaccine. I got the boosters. I got COVID. I got really sick. This was all crap. Please do something.
And what did you do?
I wrote a nasty letter about how I was tired of the people being masked, the kids being masked. And I think today we're seeing some movement. Maryland may unmask the children. They're punting it back and forth. I don't know if you saw that.
It's like, in what planet would we even be living in 10 years ago thinking about this? One day you're going to be masked and your children will be masked. You won't have to wear your mask when you're in the workplace, but they will have to wear their mask in school. And it's just
to virtue
weird.
Signal. It's not even for them. It's to make the teachers union feel better. That's what it is.
They're just the pits, the teachers union.
Yeah, they're the worst of the state.
Speaking of which, San Francisco mayor admits, quote, we failed our children after the school board recalls individuals. San Francisco mayor London Breed London Bridge falling down.
Yeah, that's what it feels like.
San Francisco Mayor London Breed said that the San Francisco Board of Education failed our children after 3 members of the board were ousted by massive margins in a recall election this week. That is huge.
Wow.
But here's the thing. We need people in November in California to remember this.
Correct.
Because don't just cleanse the educational system and at the board level, but cleanse the entire system of these politicians who are making these bad decisions at every single level of government.
Yeah, no more of my Democrat friends saying that they're going to vote for, quote, reasonable Democrats. Those days are over. There are no reasonable Democrats. I mean, I talked to a Democrat on the floor today. He said he's divesting from Maryland. He's selling his properties here and he's buying them in Florida.
Is this an elected Democrat?
Oh, yeah.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
Yep.
Now, why is that? What was the catalyst? Because obviously this person was silent with the Democrat Party their entire career.
Yeah.
What was the catalyst finally?
I think he feels like the parties walked away. And, a lot of it was about, landlord and tenant laws and just the lunacy of his party. And he said he's going to sell the real estate he owns here. He's already sold one business and he's starting to invest in states that like freedom.
So that's probably happening in California in a big way, too, because we've talked about this before about the California exit tax and the gender neutral department stores, where you have to have gender neutral aisles, which is just ridiculous. And We also have talked about in the past, and I want to just say this for the podcast listeners, that the Biden administration has officially recognized that Russia has invaded Ukraine. They've officially recognized it, even though it's kind of been going on for a while with the probing and so forth, tank in, tank out, whatever, sending, shelling over the border. But now officially the Biden administration just said today, hey, this is happening. We're going to put sanctions in, the first round of sanctions. So this is the diversion.
Yeah.
And we've talked about this from Mark and the Millennials. This is the perfect diversion for the Biden administration and for the Democrats to have you look overseas about how awful things are.
Yep.
When in fact, in this country, we're a complete and utter mess.
Oh, yeah. And wartime presidents win. We know it. They need a war. His ratings are so embarrassing. Their policies are so abominable. They have to have a war. It's the only thing that could possibly save. And it's not even for Biden. It's a war for the Democrats because they don't care who is on the ticket. They just need to maintain their power. I think they're more worried about Nancy Pelosi losing the gavel than anything else. And it's going, baby. And I can't wait to see it fall.
I have a friend who actually watches Nancy Pelosi's stock picks because there are people online that have Nancy Pelosi's stock picks published.
Wow.
And she just follows them. She buys all the stock and she's way up. The market's down and she's up.
Oh, Lord. Maybe I'm going to call my husband and let him know.
Exactly.
We've got a new investment portfolio.
So with this Russian diversion, David Sachs, he's the same person we talked about before about the social credit score in Canada, tweeted out, as Biden embroils us to an unprecedented degree in Ukrainian politics, it's worth remembering that big tech censored true stories about his family's business dealings in Ukraine weeks before the election. As bad as censorship looks at the time, it looks even worse in hindsight.
Oh, burn. Yeah. I mean,
just ripped him apart.
Oh, yeah. I mean, did you see that one bill that came out about Hunter Biden? They call it the Hunter bill. It was the free crack pipe bill. The Republicans literally titled it the Hunter bill. It was beautiful. That family has so many issues. Yeah. As soon as the name Ukraine came up, I thought, this feels a little inbred. Where's this going to go?
Oh, exactly. Because I'm sure that between Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, I'm sure the Obamas and certainly the Bidens, they probably all have interests over there.
Of course.
And look, here's the thing. I know I'm not the only person that thinks this. Americans across the country know something's not quite right.
Yep.
Because we're just not being told what's going on with respect to Hunter Biden's dealings with communist China, as well as with the Ukraine and Russia. And then the same thing with Hillary setting up the Trump administration and literally breaking into the servers, which is worse than what the Nixon administration did.
In the White House.
In the White House itself. That's why it's worse.
Someone hacked the White House servers.
Yes.
I mean, why is she not in prison? She would look so hot in an orange jumpsuit. God, those are the things of my dreams, honey.
Talk about breaking a glass ceiling,
Ooh, yeah.
So, next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Producer? Here it is. Dum 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 dum. And it's the dumbest bill in America, and it is no eviction ever in New York. No eviction ever in New York, otherwise known as expropriation of private property. So this is real, podcast listeners. Albany's no eviction ever bill will devastate landlords and New York's housing stock. In the New York Post, an Airbnb user who never intends to leave, tenants not paying enough rent to keep up the buildings, a roommate temporarily renting a room who later decides not to move out. Under the legislature's misleading name, Good Cause Eviction Bill, occupants can all remain in their apartments forever, and the property owner has no recourse under the Good Cause Eviction Bill. So, before we discuss this with our millennial, Lauren Aricon, we have Jeff Seal. He's an opinion contributor to the New York Times. The New York Times decided to put this propaganda on their YouTube channel. The New York Times is backing this bill, the New York Times, the no eviction ever bill. We have this clip. Here's Jeff Seal talking about it. Here it is.
But like many renters in New York State, it's not because they didn't pay their rent or because they're bad tenants.
Ryan's been here for 16 years. I moved in 5 years ago. We just had a baby. They gave us 60 days to move out. I think they just want us out so that they can sell it.
It's easier to sell an empty building so a new owner can gut renovate and fill the building with new, higher-paying tenants. So their landlord evicted everyone else in their building as well.
Well, I think starting with people were coming to us with such sad stories, people who had lived in their buildings for a really long time, and we had to tell them, there's nothing I can do for you.
This is Judith Goldner, a lawyer at Legal Aid. She helped draft good cause eviction.
What we're unhappy about is landlords across the state who are able to evict tenants for basically no reason.
Under good cause eviction, as long as you're paying your rent and are an otherwise good tenant, a landlord can evict you. So they can't clear out an entire building just to maximize their profits on a sale.
All lies, by the way, all lies, because New York has so many protections already for tenants. That's not what this bill does. When you have so many protections already for tenants, this bill is basically saying you can be a squatter forever and never have to leave. And the thing is, if you have a building in New York and you have obviously a tenant, there is a lease. The lease has a beginning and the lease has an end. What this bill does in New York is say, well, the lease really doesn't have an end. You can't ever evict them. And what we should really be talking about, Lauren, is why don't you go buy a house? If you're living in a really expensive city like New York, you might, and you can't buy anything in it, which is understandable, by the way. I get it. It might be time to move out to the suburbs or to another state that's a lot more friendly, because you don't get to live where you want to live. You get to live where you can afford. And that's the incentive in our system to try to get a better life, is to try to keep trading up the places where you live because you work for it.
Absolutely. Welcome to Jersey, folks. Come on over, because now you can afford to buy a house. Yeah,
Yes.
I have so little pity for this. I mean, I own properties, rental properties, long-term and short-term. Sometimes you want to sell your property, and that's good cause enough. You don't need to prove that someone's a bad tenant to decide to sell the property that you own outright. That is crazy. Or you have a mortgage on. I mean, this has gotten so bad during COVID, and these liberals are really using COVID as an excuse to sneak through all of this really property theft bills. And it's hard already. I've never had to evict anybody because I go with my gut on tenants, but I have friends who've had to evict people, and it's almost impossible, even pre-COVID, to get people out of your house, even when they don't pay. So this bill's terrifying, and it makes me never want to go to New York.
It is. Get this. In the New York Post, aimed at imposing draconian restrictions on free market apartments, this bill would create automatic lease renewal rights, even when tenants behave badly or landlords want to reclaim units for personal uses or to fix and sell the buildings. So you're the landlord, right? You have a lease. The lease has a beginning and the end. This bill in Albany, New York, would basically say, oh, well, we know that you have this private agreement. We're going to intervene ourselves and insert ourselves in this private agreement and extend the lease indefinitely. Oh, by the way, we know you own the apartment. We know you own this building that has 2 or 3 apartments in it or more, and you want to move back in because you want to renovate it because that's what you've decided to do. Oh, but it's not your building anymore. It's theirs. That's where they live. You can't do it.
Everyone's going to sell their real estate. But you know what? I think it's going to make real estate prices go down in New York faster than anywhere else. So if you're looking to buy and never rent, that might be a place.
Well, here's another thing, too. This is regulatory capture. And this is a term we've used before in Mark and the Millennials. Regulatory capture is when you have a bill that passes that basically allows the really large companies to overcome the awful regulation, but it crushes everybody else.
Correct.
So if you have 5 or 6 apartments, or let's just say you have 5 or 6 houses and you rent them, right? That pales in comparison to someone who has 1,000 apartments. And that person who has 1,000 apartments might be able to weather this awful storm until maybe the political environment gets a little bit better.
Right.
But the small person, oh no, they're
Absolutely.
gone.
Yeah.
They're wiped out.
I'm selling my long-term rental. I have a great renter, but the second he moves out and his family moves out, I'm selling it because I'm not going to continue to own a rental property that's a long-term rental in Baltimore County. They're already off their rocker. I can't wait to get rid of it.
Agreed. And Lauren, here's what's interesting too, and I want your comment about this, is when you look at this picture in the New York Post, it shows you a bunch of apartment buildings and they're ungodly ugly from the outside. And a lot of times I've been in New York City and I've seen these same buildings or buildings like them. And you say, why would anyone live there? Why is this so ugly? Why don't they try to make this more appealing to the eye? Here's the reason. The landlord has no incentive to do so because effectively he can't get this. He can't increase the rent
control
above 3% or 1.5% of the consumer price index. He can't do it. So it says the good cause eviction bill, if passed, would prevent landlords from raising rent above 3% or above 1.5% of the consumer price index, whichever is higher. So if you have people renting your building and you have like 1 meter on the outside of the building, then, and you've agreed already to pay for the utilities and so forth, then you're going to have to probably raise the rent significantly because of the increase in energy bills, which Democrats are causing.
Yep.
And then they're saying, no, you can't do it.
Unbelievable.
I mean, how do you survive?
No, people are going to go into bankruptcy court. I hope they sue the crap out of the state. I mean, at the end of the day, sue the state, because the only way you can solve some of these problems, and not just this political issue, but so many other issues, is through litigation. I mean, I want a bumper sticker that says litigate everything, because that's how you fix bad actors in a free economy. You don't regulate the crap out of them. You sue the crap out of them when they behave badly, and they fix themselves because they don't want to get sued anymore.
Exactly. And that's the last word for Mark and the Millennials, and that's the dumbest bill in America. No eviction ever in New York. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins, and our guest, Lauren Ericon. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Parler, Rumble, and our website. See you next time.